we need to have in place in order to see any impact or outcome from the curriculum that we use. So my bio is, I've been teaching for about 35 years. I've been in the field of education for about 35 years. I began my very first year teaching in New York City, and I walked into a school where there was no curriculum. I literally walked into an empty room. And I had to pull everything together on my own, and that is malpractice, and that should not be happening to teachers. Teachers do need to be guided. They do need to have a curriculum. They need to have it for a million reasons, which we'll go into. I then moved to another school where I was handed a curriculum. I was mentored, and it was night and day, just such a different experience. So I've experienced both. I've also experienced the power of curriculum as a professional development tool. I've used curricula such as Ravo. I was a classroom teacher and then a specialist. And when I was a specialist, I used Ravo by Dr. Marianne Wolf, and that was absolutely incredible professional development. So I'm aware of the need for curriculum for teachers so that they don't have to be scrambling and looking for what to teach. I'm aware of the fact that curriculum can unify a faculty and can help us all come together and put our heads together to think about how to teach best, and how curriculum can be a very powerful tool for professional development in and of itself. So that's my background with teaching. About 2 decades ago, I moved to Massachusetts and began working at the Hill for Literacy, which is one of many organizations for literacy that supports schools in taking on evidence-based practices and science-aligned curricula. So back then, Reading Street, ReadyGen, these were the big boxes that I was walking into schools every day as my job to help them take on these curricula. So I've looked at curricula through many angles, and I'm going to share with you tonight some thoughts and some evidence-based protocols and resources that you can use to help you choose the best curriculum for you. But I do want to also share that in 2012, you all know what happened in 2012 after Reading First, there was Common Core. And in 2012, I was helping the state of Tennessee to roll out Common Core and evidence-based practices for teaching writing. And that was the most powerful learning experience of my entire career. We were just on the bullet train with trying to understand what is Common Core, learning from the best of the best, the leaders, the people who'd written Common Core, learning about all of the shifts, and I could not have been more excited. And we will go into how that all impacts curriculum in a minute, but I absolutely loved the shifts. I brought them back. I spent an entire year and a summer in Tennessee going back and forth. I brought all this back to Massachusetts, went to my schools and said, I think we need to try some of this, writing, pulling evidence from sources and upping our game with knowledge building and complex text. And my schools were scared, but they trusted their leaders, and their leaders put their faith in me. And we saw incredible impact on state assessment outcomes and all kinds of outcomes. And we were galvanizing around curriculum and around these shifts. So I'm going to go into how this all ties together. At present, I now work under federal grants and research projects. And so we are constantly looking at data and evidence-based practices and what are their impact on data. So I come at this from a slightly different angle. My angle is very, very much data and evidence driven, because that is the work that I do under the grants that I'm working under. We're going to dive in. I have a lot to cover, but I do want to start, and I'm going to end on a positive note. It can feel like we're swimming upstream. I know many of you, probably all of you, came to this through a Science of Reading website page or Facebook page. Those of us who've been around for a really long time feel like there's a lot of rinse and repeat happening, but there really is progress too. 35 years ago, when I taught in the New York City public schools, we had to literally close our doors to do phonics, and phonics was a bad word. That's no longer the case. We have moved forward. So I want to start off on that positive note, and now let's dive into how curriculum can support us with continuing this forward motion. I would also love to know who's here. Donna, I'm so glad you think so too about Ravo. Do you want to jump into chat? I know some of you may be driving, cooking, doing whatever, but if people want to jump into chat and just put where you are and what is your burning question about curriculum? If you're on the East Coast, you're here at 7 o'clock at night, but no matter where you are, you're giving your time after school to come and learn about this, to come and think together about curriculum. I'm really curious where you're coming from, and throw in a question as well. All right, Ohio, Minnesota, Quebec, passionate about literacy for all. I see you, Deborah. All right, Delaware, Massachusetts is here. Best curriculum to use with secondary. Okay, we are going to get into opinion on UFly. All right. I will put my email in, and I'm happy to give you personal opinions. I'm going to be sticking to the evidence. Difference between curriculum and programs. Rebecca Miles, not to call you out, but when we get to that, if you want to jump on. All right. Donna, if anything comes into chat that I should pay attention to, please let me know.
I will.
All right. Thank you. All right. So here's our agenda. We're going to talk about what is curriculum first, just so we have shared definitions. Sometimes we use words and we're not sure that we're all thinking about those words in the same way. So I'm going to go a little basic and then come up to high level research. But what is curriculum? What is high quality? What is the difference between evidence-based and research-based? Because that is huge and that is getting lost in the conversations. And then we're going to talk about a very short school case study, but we're going to look at that through the lens of how can we vet schools that are already using curricula to see if that curriculum might work for me. Well, first to see, is it effective for them? How do we look at the data? And then how do we figure out if that curriculum might be good for us as well? All right, so what is curriculum? I am quoting from the website of the great state of Rhode Island, which is just down the road from me, and they are doing fantastic work with evidence-based practices and science of reading. So according to the website of Rhode Island State Department of Ed, curriculum, they may have lifted this from somewhere. Curriculum is a standards-based sequence of planned experiences where students practice and achieve proficiency in content and applied learning skills. Again, to reiterate, we need curricula. I don't have data to support that schools using curricula do better than those that don't, and I'm a data person, but I'm going to give you one belief tonight, and that is a belief. And curricula can be something you buy in a box. That is your tool, wonders. And then your actual curriculum is going to be how you use that resource. So what I have here are images, wonders. It's one of many curricula in schools that I support. I support many, many schools. Last year I had 50. This year I probably have close to that. They all use different curricula. I see them all working. I hear from teachers every day in after school meetings, small groups, what they think about their curricula. And I lesson plan and I help them build their maps. So what you see on the right here is a curriculum map. That is more what I consider a curriculum. The one on the left, the box, the things that arrive in your classroom are your tools and resources, but your cheat sheet of what you're doing every day in your classroom that you've mapped out, that I consider your curriculum. Rebecca, would you add anything, or is there anybody who'd like to chat or come off mute and define curriculum or ask a question about how you define curriculum? There she is, yay.
I would agree with you.
almost exactly, except for that if you don't have a core resource, I don't think you have a curriculum. So without that core resource for everything to be built around as you're mapping, then we don't really have a core resource because you can't have a coherent sequence and system.
What if somebody really extraordinary, really, really good, pulled together sets of texts and aligned them all to the standards and had a document? Because I've seen it, and I've seen incredibly smart, amazing people put those together. Just wouldn't cut it for you, Rebecca?
It might. The ones
Okay.
that I have seen have not been done well. And the other thing I say, then I worry about scale.
Yeah.
Worried about sustainability. So that's why
I
I'm
do.
hesitant, because overall I'm thinking about school reform and scale. As you do that work every day, this is about scale, right?
Agreed. All right. Okay. So definition of curriculum would be that box, that resource, that tool. And we're in consensus that that tool is needed to have a curriculum. And then your curriculum would be everything that you map out. Right. What should we look for in a resource? All right, so these are some of the criteria that come from, I think it's Ed Reports, as some of the important characteristics to look for in a curriculum. Your curriculum should be content rich. That is just non-negotiable. And I actually don't know of many. Well, I'm going to name them. F&P possibly, but definitely Calkins may not be as content rich. I'm going to name those two. Among the others that I think are acceptable, there's an array of maybe 12 that are the most commonly used. And when I work with teachers daily, looking at the complex text, they seem content rich. Throwback to 2013, how many of you were there then when we pulled out these content rich complex texts? And the teachers were freaking out. This is too hard. This is going to be too hard for our kids. I was a little freaked out too. But now we're in a place where content rich, complex text is essential. Accessible, user-friendly, culturally relevant, free of bias, incredibly important. I do have worries about a couple of curricula. I won't be featuring them tonight. You won't see any images of them that I think have a lot of work to do in that area. Research-based, but I'm going to get into evidence-based, standards aligned. We want to make sure that we are addressing all of those beautiful standards in a coherent and not fragmented way. That is really important. Our instruction should be coherent, not hitting one or two standards and talking about that standard. No, we're talking about a coherent learning experience where the standards are supported but not broken up. And then the tool and your pacing guide, what you create, should have clear purpose, structure, and pacing. That is so critical for the teachers. And that is really hard work. And all the coaches on here, I bow down to you. That is hard work. I'm at it every day, and I am in awe of the coaches who are supporting the teachers in putting together their pacing. All right. There is a plus at the top of this slide. It's called HQIM plus, and that plus is probably the most important symbol on all my slides and of my whole presentation, because there is a vital plus that has been missing from our field and in the conversation in the past couple of years, and that is the what works, the IES. IES stands for Institute for Educational Sciences. It is our National Department of Education, and it is what, well, it's where our tax dollars go to fund all the research on what works. Is it a perfect institution? No, but is it doing its best to try and help us sort through what works? It is. And it has not gotten enough attention, especially in the recent conversation. So we want to be paying close attention to that National Department of Education and the research that's happening and what it's finding. And the plus that I would add is that the key practices in the curriculum should be based in evidence And then the really most important plus of this evening is that there should be evidence that a curriculum works. If a research study hasn't been conducted on that, then visit a school, but make sure that the school you're visiting has seen ELA gains. And I would throw out to you of 3% or higher. That seems to be the standard error of measurement. So you want to see, did they go from 40 to 44? Then that's worth visiting. But I will tell you a real life story. I met with a school head this week, and she said, well, we went and visited this district because they're using a curriculum we're interested in. And I said, well, let's check at the state data, and their data was all down for the 2 years that they'd been using it. Does that mean it doesn't work? No, there's a million things that impact school change, but I would want to see that in some school or some district somewhere that the data is going up. So that is a piece that I would recommend that we consider. All right, now we're going to dive into the definitions and then talk about some of the criteria for choosing. Okay, as we dive into what is curriculum, what are the curricular options out there, remember two sides of the rope, and curriculum is hitting both. We have our foundational skills, simple view of reading, that's crack the code, that's be able to pull the words from the page, foundational. Then we have all the higher order work that is happening K through 12 from day one of kindergarten, vocabulary, knowledge building, comprehension strategies, all oral language, vocabulary, all of that deeper language at the center work happening K through 12 right from the first day of kindergarten, alongside the foundational skills. So when we look at curriculum, we want to look at the foundational skills, the quality, the sequences of how the phonic patterns are introduced. And then we also want to look at the whole picture. Are there rich, complex texts? Are these sequenced in a meaningful way? Is there vocabulary that is stretched? So there's a whole puzzle there. All right, so let's look now at what the different curriculum options are and the ways that we can bucket these. We have curricula that are technically called open source, and these are somewhat free. I know CKLA used to be free. The 2022-23 version is not. That's paid. That's costly. But the older version I heard this week is still available and is free. L is free. What you do, you can pay for the workbooks. You can pay to get the materials bound. L is expeditionary learning. Fish Tank, I believe, is free. Bookworms, I know, is free. I've worked with schools that use that. You just have to buy the novels that your students would read. And then Let's Know. Let's Know is an amazing K through 3 language building curriculum. All right. Those are the open source. Now I'm going to go into the whole, and obviously I have a preference for them because if something's free, that's always nice for schools. Even if you have to buy the books, I imagine it's still cheaper. Okay, then the partial curricula. So CKLA, many of you may know, has a domain curriculum where you're learning knowledge, and then they also have a skills curriculum, but not everybody pairs the two CKLA together. Wit and Wisdom has knowledge building, rich texts, beautifully sequenced, but again, I don't think it has the foundational skills. You have to fill in for that. You have EBLI, which is a beautiful foundational skills approach, but then you would have to fill in with the rich texts. And then you have Let's Know, which is rich texts and knowledge and academic language building. All right. Then you have the full package curriculum, which are Wonders, CKLA, Open Court. Many of you have heard of these. These are all the foundational skills and all of the rich texts and all of the knowledge building, beautifully, carefully sequenced with spiraling knowledge building happening over the grades. These have a lot of resources these whole package. These are some of the programs I used, older iterations when I supported schools. They come with everything. They have your tier 2, tier 3. They have supports for English learners or multilingual learners. They have everything. They have, if your kids are not into a certain topic, you can move on because there are many topics. So they have a lot of information, or they have a lot of resources, but that is by design so that they can be all comprehensive. They do require that a coach or a teacher leader work on creating those curriculum maps that I showed you earlier. Teachers benefit from having support with navigating these. Quick comment from Devora, I hope it's okay if I quote you, but something that you said this week that really stayed with me is these curricula can be large and can be a labyrinth to figure out, but with a strong coach guiding you, I never hear teachers complain. So I work in a lot of districts that use Into Reading, that use Wonders, that use all of these, Open Court a lot. And I'm in small group breakouts with teachers and they vent, and they never vent about the volume or the bloat or the number of resources. They really don't, because they have coaches guiding them. So as long as you have that, these are nice because they are all encompassing. Okay, what happens if you're using a core curriculum? You bought it, you paid for it, it's in your schools, and you're collecting your data and you're seeing your kids are having trouble with fluency in second grade year after year, or you're seeing that they're having a struggle, your data, your universal screeners are telling you writing isn't working out well in grade 3, your scores there are low, or decoding in grade 1, whatever it is. Follow your data. If you walk away with one idea, it's follow your data. Collect your universal screeners, look at your ELA proficiency rates, look at your DIBELS, figure out where your areas of need are, and then look at, can we tweak what we have, or do we need to even look at a supplement? And I will tell you, these big boxes have not been through research studies. They have weaknesses. They were built by humans. You will find their weaknesses. Your data will show you. And then there are all kinds of options that you can turn to support you in strengthening the areas where you see that you may need more. And there are beautiful evidence-based approaches out there. UFly, I believe, is evidence-based. I believe it's been through randomized control trials, but don't quote me on that. You'd have to Google it. You'd have to search UFly RCT to make sure that it has been. I know that it was developed through research studies, so it does seem to be like a strong option.
I don't think it's
go ahead.
RCT. I don't think it is. I know it's been tested in classrooms. It's been researched in classrooms.
Researched in classrooms. Perfect. Thank you. All right. Then there are other options up here. SIPS, I believe, has had some research on it. I know Linda Mood Bell ran some research studies, but you'd have to just put the approach in, go to what works, or just search in Google and see if you can find research studies on these various supplements. Now, moving out of tier 1 instruction, if you have a tier 1 problem, you're going to deal with that at a tier 1 level. If you notice grade 1, all of your kids are struggling with areas of decoding and you really need some kind of supplement, you're going to find one of those. But if only your students who are identified with disabilities or on the cusp are struggling in a certain area, then you can look at tier 2, 3 curricula. And I can't give you a rundown of all of these. What works can. I know that Passport from Sopris has been through randomized control trials and gotten strong outcomes. So again, I would recommend that if you are noticing that your students with disabilities or your students receiving services are struggling in certain areas, you'd want to look at your tier 2, 3. And if you're not using one of those large all-encompassing packages, then you'd want to have something for your tier 2, 3 students. And by that, I mean students who are served in a pull-out setting or in small group by extra service providers. Okay. That was just getting us on the same page about what is curriculum. Now we will dive in and talk about evidence-based versus research-based. I saw a lot of questions coming into chat. How do I know which one to pick? I would recommend bringing evidence into the front of the conversation. I'll say it again. I said it before. We are not talking enough about the evidence on the curriculum and the evidence on the practices. We call ourselves science of reading, but are we really looking carefully at the science, or are we going by, I like it, I don't, that person likes it, it has this feature? I would recommend looking at the evidence on the program or the evidence from schools that are using it in terms of ELA proficiency gains. Evidence is not being foregrounded. I'm a little worried that that may be by design. There may be marketing reasons. I don't know what it is, but that word is not being used carefully. So I'm going to dive in now and talk about evidence. And evidence, back to what we were talking about earlier with, we've got the characteristics of usability and all that good stuff. But here's my story. In 2019, 2020, I began hearing from all my schools, Ed Reports Green. I was like, what is this? Ed Reports Green? What does that mean? And I began searching and reading and trying to figure out what this means, what on earth an Ed Report Green means. And at first I heard Ed and I thought, oh, well, it must be related to IES and the national government because there must be a vetting system. And then I found out that it's not, and that it was a nonprofit doing great work, pushing Common Core, the pieces of Common Core that I was really inspired by and bought in. But when I printed out the Ed Reports document, the whole thing, and I read the entire thing line by line, cover to cover, I could not find evidence. There were 3 gateways, but I thought you need to add a 4th. The 4th needs to be, is there evidence on the practices in here? Is there evidence that this curriculum actually raises ELA outcomes? And that really surprised me. I wrote to my state education association leaders. I live in a very friendly state. The people met with me, Zoomed with me. I expressed all of my concerns about the fact that we weren't prioritizing evidence. And they listened and they continue to listen. And it's an ongoing conversation. What I did appreciate about Ed Reports was that it was foregrounding the Common Core shifts that I bought in to, but it lacked the word evidence. And it did have in section 3.2.31, I can put this into chat, it wrote that materials contain explanations of the instructional approaches of the program and identification based on research-based strategies. That is a mouthful, so I'm going to put that right into chat so you can all see. But having the creator of a program write how it is aligned to research is hugely problematic. If you go to the units of study and the Lucy Calkins website, they have volumes and volumes on how everything they're doing is related to research. But yet there are practices in there that defy the research, and there's a lot that's missing. So I would just be careful, wolf in sheep's clothing. We can't just have a list of how this aligns to the research. We can do better. And when Ed Reports came out, a lot of people were sharing this document with me, which I'm about to share with you. And I just put the link into chat. And then I felt, now I can breathe. This is my wheelhouse. This is what I know. So on the left, you see the Ed Reports gateways, all good stuff. Text quality. Do we need complex text? Yes. I'm going to give you the research on it. Look it up from Shanahan. When we give students stretch text, their reading comprehension grows faster. Their outcomes are higher and stronger. We need to be giving that stretch text. Without that, nothing else works. Knowledge building, I'm going to go into soon. When we are teaching a topic, we need to make sure that we foreground teaching, pre-teaching about that topic in order to raise understanding of that topic. And it is a good thing to build knowledge, without a doubt. So we should be doing that. Will that raise ELA outcomes? The research is pretty conclusive that no, just building knowledge or foregrounding the building of knowledge is not necessarily going to raise outcomes. There are a whole lot of other pieces that we need, but it's a good thing to do. And I was glad to see that. And then usability, fair enough. We absolutely need everything to be usable, whether it works or not. If it's not usable, then what is the point? So we absolutely needed all three of those. But where I felt like I could breathe again was when people brought this guide to my attention. And this guide foregrounds all through it how to look at the research on the program. So friends, there's no simple answer. There are multiple pieces that we have to look at. And I'm not even getting into the required coaching. See Craft, he's got a great meta-analysis on coaching. We're not talking about principles and vision and all the systems that we need. We need our MTSS systems in place, all of that. But just at the level of curriculum, these three circles are not enough. We need the fourth. We need to be looking at evidence on that curriculum. So I'll go in a little bit toward what do I mean by evidence versus research-based. This distinction is the most important distinction of the evening. I don't know why it's been lost in our national conversation, but it has. Evidence-based means that large-scale randomized control trial studies or quasi, but some kind of study has been run that shows the full approach, not just parts, raises the targeted outcomes. Open Court has run them, CKLA has run them. We need all of our curricula to be running these, and in the absence of it, then we look at the ELA outcomes in the districts that are using them. We factor in the story, we factor in the qualitative, who's the admin, how was the coaching, we factor all that in, but we need to see some kind of indicator that these approaches can work. Research-based is a very worrisome term. It means elements of the approach align to practices that have been found effective or suggest a rationale. Structured literacy is very good and very important, and we definitely want to look for that term. And it's not enough. We also want to look for, has there been research that has shown that this has worked? Here are some examples. Evidence-based. Bookworms, Wahoo has just been through an RCT, randomized control trial, and shown to significantly raise outcomes. Does that mean it's guaranteed to raise outcomes in all schools? No. But is it a good bet? Yes, because it's been through this trial. Open Court had an earlier randomized control trial, which I think showed positive gains. The more recent one was more neutral. However, I know the person, Dr. Sarah Cavalry, who led the evaluation of Open Court, and she said that in all the debrief meetings, the teachers were saying that they just weren't using it. So that comes back to the coaching. And then Let's Know has also been through randomized control trials. I think Fish Tank may have been as well, but those are evidence-based. Those are really important. They have been proven to work. Research-based, I worry about it because it's not enough, but Wonders, CKLA, into reading all of these align with the research. There's nothing in it that contradicts the research. Contradicts the research, 3Qing in the absence of foregrounding phonics in the early foundation is worrisome. So I would worry about the F&P, I would worry about the units of study, because they have elements that actually contradict what the research shows works. Okay, evidence-based, now digging deeper. What if my program, the one I'm considering, I'm leaning in towards using CKLA or into reading, it's not on your list, Leslie, what do I do? Then you would start to look at the ingredients. Does it have strategies that are shown to work and not too many? Maybe you've all seen the ice cream cone with 30 scoops and each one's a new strategy of the week. Too many, too confusing, and it actually can promote bad habits. You want to teach a small number of very powerful strategies and take them to the level of independent application So yeah, you may teach them in 10 lessons, but it's going to take a lot more than 10 lessons of mentoring and coaching kids to get them. And then finally, it just becomes natural practice, and the text is really centered. The text is centered all along. The strategies are helping the kids access the text. Once they've got those natural and internalized, then it's all about just diving in deeply to that text. We're not teaching them how to get into the text, they're in it, and these strategies are helping them. Data-based instruction, that's another one that has a really nice evidence base to it, DBI, out of, I think it's University of Michigan, Minnesota. I'm sorry, Erica Lemke is doing a lot of work with that. But these are evidence-based approaches to instruction that you want to see are in the curriculum, or that you can use with the curriculum. Research-based. So Orton Gillingham, I used to proudly say, I'm Orton Gillingham trained. There isn't necessarily an evidence base to Orton Gillingham. Does it align with a lot of the research? Yes. Can it be improved? There are ways. Read alouds. Molly Ness has done great work around read alouds. There's definite research emerging in the importance of that. And we can be looking at that research and looking at our curriculum, and does it all align? Vocabulary building. Vocabulary building has a tiny, tiny effect size, barely negligible. But in combination with other factors, it's an important thing to do. They're all important to do together, but you do want to look for the highest lever strategies. Contradicts research. Meta-analysis by Dolores Perrin, one of my advisors at Teachers College, and Steve Graham found that isolated sentence instruction removed from teaching sentences at the same time as text structure, responding to text, using text structure to guide you in doing that, and weaving in sentence work as you do the two together, that would contradict the work. Isolated grammar or isolated sentence. Then the next one is a myth that I'm going to clear up on the next slide, but that is the idea of trying to build a million facts in the minds of our children as an intervention. And there is not a whole lot of research to back that doing that as the primary focus is going to raise ELA outcomes. Is building knowledge good? Should we be doing it? Absolutely. But we should be foregrounding self-regulated use of strategies and practices where children are in charge, they're driving the process, they're attacking the text, they're mining and pulling out from it. That is what needs to be in the front of our mind. That is our role. The building of the knowledge and the schemas happens alongside that. Evidence-based versus research-based. I want to draw your attention to a wonderful recent IES guide. These don't get enough attention. This is the IES guide for reading interventions grades 4 through 9. I can put the link in a minute, but these guides are free. And I heard Holly Lane say recently she put a car up for sale for $500. Nobody bought it, so she changed the price to $1,500. Then she had buyers. These IES guides are free, and they should be sitting right there on the table, printed out in hard copy and like dog-eared as we're looking at curriculum. Put it side by side with the IES guides to let us know what we're looking for. For example, a common misconception that guide clears up beautifully is, are we aiming to teach knowledge in order to pass on a million facts, or are we aiming to teach students how to accumulate knowledge purposefully toward building larger schemas and understandings? So a common misunderstanding that I see in teachers, and I watched this transformation happen in the schools I was working in. At first, the schools were foregrounding teaching practices and strategies for gaining knowledge, how to attack a text, how to understand it, how to build a schema, and their ELA scores were going up. Then they switched gears, and the teachers were telling me, well, I'm teaching about Leonardo da Vinci and I have to get all my facts in before the end of the week, and I don't have time to do the slow work of building strategies. And we saw the scores going down. We saw the ELA outcomes coming down year after year. So I would just be careful to keep the balance. This latest IES guide clears this up so beautifully. It's not about building a million facts so that anytime a child hits a text, they have more knowledge. And now they can understand that text. We're not likely to meet that. But what we should and can be doing, and what these research studies are finding, is building knowledge of the topic before we teach it, pre-teaching that. Give a simple text, curb cut in. That was something I learned in Tennessee. If we're going to get them to complex text, give them a simpler entry to get that percolating background knowledge, and then we can go for the high stretch. Use a video, a 2-minute video on a topic, curb cut in to get them to that complex knowledge building text. And then third, use questions. Courtney Hatton, Hattan, if you don't know her work, she's doing extraordinary work on how to help students understand complex knowledge that they're learning. What are the steps? It's not a KWL chart, but how do we activate the knowledge that kids have effectively? All right, diving deeper, this is the almighty ESSA chart that overviews effective practices and the research on them. This is my holy grail. It's what I work with every day when I write grants and fulfill them. We want to be looking at the What Works Clearinghouse guides and what meets the strongest level of evidence. What Works can guide you in this, but the lowest level that I won't get grants funded for is, and that we probably aren't going to see much ELA growth, is approaches that demonstrate a rationale. Those are good, those are worth piloting, but watch your data closely. Promising are approaches that have a little bit of research strung together. Moderate, there may have been some studies, not the highest tier. And then strong is a randomized control trial where you had multiple schools, some received the intervention, some didn't. Those who received it did significantly better. That is really hard to achieve. And I speak from the depths of personal experience with having led an RCT last year. It is incredibly hard to get that kind of outcome when you've got the even control matched and you're trying to implement something to the point of seeing gains over and above the control. But when you do, you know you've got your best bet. All right, so back to our agenda. I'm going to wrap up with how do I pick my curricula. I've pointed you to a couple of resources. I hope you will print the IES guides. As Tiffany Hogan says, they're prepaid. You paid for them with your taxes. In the absence of a research study on the curriculum that you want to use, then you would go to the pieces and the key levers within that curriculum and look and see what is the evidence for each. And then you would want to confirm this by looking at schools that have made significant gains. This is one of the schools that I have worked with. Each year they were climbing 4 to 5%. So we knew that they were headed in a direction where our data was telling us we should keep doing what we're doing. And then we were looking at the sub data to see what to tweak. This school district was using evidence-based practices, weaving them into their existing curriculum. I'm going to tell a sad story. Because their curriculum didn't meet Ed Report's green level, they had to drop it. The one they replaced didn't cause much loss, but why drop it when your data looks like this? And why drop it for something that didn't even have an evidence-based gateway? That's my concern. This is another district. A couple of tips on how to figure out which, before you visit a school and decide you want to do what they're doing. Check their statistics, go and look at their ELA scores. Are their ELA scores going up? In MA, you can just put MA, DESE, and then put the town, and the scores will come right up, and you can look over their history and see if their scores are going up. Rhode Island, you just put RICAS scores into Google. Every state has this, so you can look them up. School Digger, in my experience, matches every single time I check School Digger against the state data. So School Digger is one of the easiest to use. Do check free and reduced lunch rates. If you see this amazing data, your district is 40% free and reduced, you go to NCER, you find out, oh, their free and reduced lunch rate is 5%. You'd want to be wary of that. You can check local media. You have to have sources you can trust. Awards are always a good sign. If a school has won an ESSA award, one of our schools did for closing the gap. And again, they were using evidence-based practices. This is a daunting project. Who can we trust? Who should we be turning to in order to get this information? There are wonderful literacy organizations that have no allegiance to any particular curricula. I'm on the East Coast, so I know the three biggest, and I'm only naming them because they're the three biggest, and I respect all of them. Hill for Literacy, Keys to Literacy, Literacy How. These are the ones in my neighborhood. I worked in one, so I know them from the inside. I know that they don't take any funding, that they have no allegiance to one curricula. We were trained in how to support a dozen, and we supported all of them. So I would go to organizations that have no allegiance to any particular curricula, and they can consult to you. You can call them up and say, hey, we're looking at picking a curriculum, and they can help you through the process. I would be careful of going with marketers. You can speak to a marketer to learn about their program, but take that with a grain of salt. I would go to your local consulting organizations or your state ed department. Like, I've learned that if you just call them up, sometimes they'll call you back, and you get these amazing people who are looking at different curricula all the time, and you can kind of pick their brain. If you have district people who are working across multiple schools, they can give you insight. So that was our agenda. I hope that evidence can come back into the conversation, be up at the front. Our kids are worth it, and our kids deserve it.
Wow. That's amazing. Thank you. I'm completely overwhelmed. Good thing I don't have to make curriculum decisions.
I know. We feel for all of you.
I don't
We
envy
really
you folks
do.
that are doing that. We have a ton of excellent questions. So
Right.
do you want to go back and take them one by one, or how do you want to?
Whatever you recommend. You do this all the time, Donna. You're the pro.
So, all right. I'm going to start at the beginning. We had. Okay, so someone asked about curriculum for ESL students. Any recommendations? Any thoughts?
I know that some of the larger curriculum companies with the larger options do have strands that are specifically designed for multilingual learners. And I've seen those materials, and they look good. They look aligned with what we know multilingual learners need. And then I would just look at the evidence base. There's a great book out by Elsa. I can't.
Urdanus.
Thank you.
Egan?
That is
I
a
think.
great book to have dog-eared. That one sits right on my bedside table. It's one I go back to a lot. That will give you pointers.
Okay, I'll look up the name of that. Did I hear someone trying to get on? Elsa Cardenas Hagen, there we go. Oh, Literacy
Yeah.
Foundations for English.
Yes, yes.
Perfect. Okay, next question.
I'm sorry, I can't just say a curriculum. I so
know,
wish
I get
to do
it.
that, right, Donna? Like,
No,
we're
you
just
can't.
trying to just make it easy for you.
No, you really shouldn't.
But we can't. I mean, it's a personal decision. It depends on your data.
Right. Okay, next question. How can we teach background knowledge when everything we teach is seen as promoting either a left-wing or right-wing agenda? Yeah.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, there's science, there's There's,
Right.
there's areas where you can go, but I don't want to step away from the difficult conversations either. It is really tricky, but reframe the question, think about the question, because each child is a little universe on their own journey too. And we want to be teaching our kids how to use effective strategies to be able to gather and gain and internalize and turn the knowledge into schemas and ideas. We want to put the learner first and teach them how to find the knowledge that they need and how to learn the knowledge that they need. So we'll be presenting some, but our bigger goal is to teach them to learn how to learn. Decades of research support the power of strategy instruction. Rebecca, did you want to add something?
When you have that core curriculum and you have your sequence, you're really starting from the text, not what we determine the background knowledge is, what's giving them access to the learning at hand, instead of determining what background knowledge they have to have. It's what are we going to do as a community to come around a text? So that's, instead of just random picking background knowledge, what does our community need to access this text that we decided that we're going to work on?
That would be mic drop.
Here's one that I think the answer is it depends who you talk to, but the question is, should phonics be taught in small group or in whole group?
Donna, wouldn't you say small group? I mean, a little bit whole group. And you've got to know Sarah Siegel,
I'm sorry, Sadie.
Seigel. She is one of the people you need to know. And she's done work with Carol Connor for decades.
Oh,
Unbelievable.
yes.
She presented at Lunch and Lit. If you put Lunch Lit Read, she comes up, I believe it's October 4th. I think I've
Of this
memorized.
year, of last year?
Of this year.
Okay,
If
so
somebody
that,
wants to put Lunch Lit Read, she talks about the exact dosage.
perfect. And that's available on,
All free.
right.
Go
and
binge.
I'll blank. The, not Elizabeth, Margaret.
Right to
Goldberg,
read.
the Right to
Margaret
Read.
Goldberg, Right to Read website. Yeah. If you
So-
want to binge, if you want to get the real stuff, no playing around, it's all there.
Yeah, and all of those are archived, so you can see all those. That's really good. Okay, so we had Linda Diamond on maybe 10 months ago, and she did a small group instruction, and the research is more leaning in support of small group instruction because you're personalizing it to their needs. Large group instruction often teaches to the middle, and your low kids aren't getting it, and the high kids are going to hang themselves from boredom. So, so that's my understanding. Okay. Where are we? Hang in there with me. Here's one. I'm a pediatrician and I have 2 dyslexic children. I live in a small town in Illinois, and I'm not having success with local school districts advocating for science and reading curriculum. We have a balanced literacy district. We'd love info on how to better show data to SOR curriculum. I would say go to the IES guides, right?
Oh, how to bring a research guide. Yes, IES. Yeah. And do this in community. I'm trying to make a change in my own hometown, and we need a community.
Right.
You need 10, 20 parents, and you need to be very measured, and you need to check your emotions at the door because crying does not help.
That's right.
Been there 15 years ago. You need to bring the data, you need to bring the IES guides, and be ready to be in for the long haul and think about the next generation.
And the other question was, how many years does it typically take in order to see ELA gains?
We see them first year when we foreground evidence-based practices, and I will do a quick plug for writing because that's my area. We saw 20% gains in our New York City schools last year. Granted, they were softer because they hadn't had as much evidence, but we see them right away. I would not wait. You should see a 3.5. We worked in Rhode Island last year. We had a 3.5% gain in all of our schools. Bradley, Tennessee had 3.5. I would 3 is your standard error measure. You want to see 3 in year 1. I would not wait. I would be really worried if I didn't see them right away. because balanced literacy said, wait, it takes years. We're going to take years. You can do things in parallel. You can do the slow work and you can do the fast work. Find the fast levers. Writing, nonfiction writing is a huge fast lever.
Someone's interested in your thoughts on my view in ARC. Are we giving opinions or should I go on to the next one?
Yeah, I think we should go on. Send me an
Okay.
email, buy me a glass of wine.
There you go. Any evidence-based writing curriculum for first grade?
Yeah, if I can, I'm going to put out research studies. Think SRSD. We have evidence that our approach significantly raises the outcomes. We have it from schools and we have it from research studies that have targeted grade 1. It is a way of teaching writing, but it's the only one that I know of that's evidence-based. So,
do you have an opinion on the writing revolution?
I really love because, but so. I think it's a great way to extend sentences. I don't think that sentence writing is the right way in. I don't know of any research that supports that. The research on isolated sentence writing has not been positive. But I love the writing revolution for how it did usher in a revolution of let's write about what we're learning about. And we weren't doing that before. Writing has been divorced. It's a huge problem in the large boxed curriculum. And writing revolution is spot on there with let's write about what we're reading.
Mm-hmm. Okay. This is just a comment. It's frustrating that evidence-based programs, bookworms, and open court get rated partially meets on ed reports, which makes them out of the running in some districts. And that's so true.
Change.
Yeah.
That needs to change.
Well, for this community here that's meeting tonight, Reading League is coming out with a curriculum. I don't even want to say guide. They've done some independent assessment of curriculum and by reviewers, and it's not nothing's rated. It's just gives the facts about each of the curriculums, and that guide is coming out shortly. So there's going to be a rollout either with Reading League and myself or some other entity, and so stay tuned. That is coming soon, and it's sorely needed. Okay.
If I can be self-serving, I'm seeing a lot of writing questions. I'm just going to put thinksrsd.com. That is a website that I help maintain. There is a group of researchers and teachers who've been studying an approach called SRSD for writing for 40 years. Talk about a research to practice gap. And there is tremendous research on that approach, and that website is partly funded by the federal government to make materials free. There are starter kits, there's a Facebook group, and you can use all of that for free.
Okay. Do you feel that Natalie Wexler's criticism of ed reports is fair, considering that some basils are green and bookworms gets a yellow? Any thoughts on what the curriculum insight program is and endeavoring?
I think her criticism is very fair. That ed reports, I don't know. Okay, ed reports has its system, right? And it met the certain, but if it had that fourth gateway for evidence, it would be all green there. So what I wish Natalie Wexler, if any of you email her or talk to her, would do is say, let's foreground evidence. Because she writes about a lot of things, but I'd love to see her writing more about evidence, featuring the IES guides, bringing evidence into the conversation. She would be very fair if she said, we need a fourth gateway and it needs to be evidence, and they'd be fully green there. Curriculum Insight Project, I don't know who's funding it, and I would just want to be careful about who's funding somebody that I am taking curriculum advice from.
That is a good point. All right, here we go. I'm going to be mindful of time here.
Yeah.
8:03. Okay, someone listed the lunch and lit. for viewers, this chat is chock full of information, so I would recommend that you download the chat. There's 3 buttons on your chat. I don't know, what do you want to call it, whatever it is, but there's 3 buttons and it'll say save chat. I would recommend that you do that. I will try to do the same and send it with the recording. Okay, I think we're going to end it there because it's 8:03. And thank you, Leslie.
Go
Well
forth
done.
with evidence as you're due north.
That's right. All right. Thank you, everyone, for attending.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your afternoon and evenings.